both for joining us and sharing your insight. Now we move on to Asia. Myanmar Junta's airstrike on rebel-held town in hunger-hit West has left at least 12 people dead in an overnight bombing. The junta holds just 3 of 17 townships in coastal Rakhine as it struggles to regain territory ahead of a disputed election it plans to launch in areas under its control this December. Myanmar's military has blockaded Rakhine state amid clashes with ethnic fighters in the multi-front civil war that has gripped the country since the junta's 2021 coup, ousting the democratic government. The Arakan Army, known as AA, a local ethnic armed group, has vowed to prevent the junta's election, set to begin in phases from December 28, from taking place in areas under its control. An Arakan Army spokesperson has said that the dead included 5 children, while another 20 people were wounded. Both the military and the Arakan Army have been accused of atrocities in Rakhine, where about 20% of the population has been displaced by this conflict. As per reports, 57% of families in central Rakhine cannot meet basic food needs, up from 33% in December last year, with conditions likely much worse in more remote areas. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, what impact might the junta's planned December elections have on this conflict dynamics?
Sima, good to join you. It's extremely, sad, this situation, to say the least, especially when there's various reports saying that the junta is, pouring 500-pound bombs at various points onto civilians. This and it's, as you mentioned in your reporting, this coup in 2021, when the National League of Democracy was voted in 2015 with 67 seats, and the junta, the army, still holding on to a lot of power of 25 seats. But that democratic process meant that they got a big majority. And it's important to say this, because there is such a long history of socialism, communism, and very sadly within that, over the last 75 years plus, but also we've just seen this, there was an earthquake at the beginning of the year as well. This is absolutely tragic. Various reports of, civilians on the move in a number of areas, and also, as you've said, they need shelter, there's food, they need provision, and they need help. But this really does show something when the army seems that it can drop 500-pound bombs on civilians, and then saying, right, we're going to have this election. As I often say, and I don't mean it rudely or don't mean it as a brush off, again, this is an extremely complex area, complex part of the world. People have fought for democracy, people have fought to then be able to have an economic policy. If you look at Mises.org, where it talks about establishing, private companies, people being able to then be in charge of their own destiny, instead of looking at socialism, a more cooperative structure and mindset, which is what the army has then gone back to. So on the one hand, it's turning around and saying, we are going to hold elections, and then it's throwing munitions around that it shouldn't. And then we have this liberation army coming in, and as you reported, turning around and saying, well, we're going to hold the town and the villages that we have taken. As I say, there's a long history, and it is very, very sad. And in regard to the fact that it's totalitarian, it's from a military junta central positioning. And as I've said, when you then recently have had nearly 5 years of democracy are wanting to push towards that, when the National League of Democracy won over 67 seats, it's extremely sad. and anyone, and particularly with the civilians suffering in the way that they are at the moment. Assume.
Yes, it is really sad, the situation, and given all the reasons that you have mentioned, now looking back at Arakan Army's vow to block the elections, how do you think, how likely is it the process to be seen as legitimate, both domestically and internationally?
Well, you're asking an extremely good question, and the big question should be asked is why does the army think it's perfectly acceptable, as I say, of underlining another sort of fourth time to drop these munitions onto civilians? I find it rather interesting in another theatre where they're constantly accusing a certain army of behaving where it does whatever it can to then make sure that civilians are taken out of the way, and that's in regard to the Israel situation. So international people that will be inspecting, if they're allowed in to inspect the elections, etc., need to take this very seriously, and voices need to raise over what is going on presently out there. So that we need to watch that. And as you quite rightly say, liberation armies, that particular group turning around saying no, we're not going to recognize the electoral process in that situation. We always come back to an interesting quote from Stalin that it says it's not who votes that's important, it's who counts the votes, and that is always a concern in these kind of situations when it's led by a military junta that, as we say, had a coup 2021 to then deny the democratic process that had happened in 2015, Asuma.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark Sutherland, for joining us and sharing your insight as a geopolitical analyst. Thank you very much.